Hello everyone and welcome to Dassault Systèmes session at the 2021 Digital World City Summit. My name is Annette Burgdorf, I'm a Franco-German journalist and I'm the moderator of this event. For the next hour, we will be discussing sustainable cities and resilient infrastructure in the digital era. Cities are key drivers of sustainability and central to our lives. Did you know that by 2050, 70% of the world's population will be living in them? And in some regions, such as Europe and Latin America, it is already the case. 60% of the built environment required for this urban population does not yet exist. Cities are the powerhouses of economic growth, generating 80% of global GDP. So we are going to look at a whole host of issues to give you all a sense of just how fast designing, building, and renovating cities is improving and how we are trending towards more livable cities. And please do not hesitate to flash this QR code to access additional exclusive content and to take part in our mini quiz. There are 4 areas: regions, cities, districts, and buildings. At each session, I will tell you exactly where to go. Just enter your personal information and don't miss the chance of winning a virtual reality cardboard mask, which allows you to jump to the past and discover the ancient railway station of Singapore, as if you were there. And now it's my pleasure to welcome Rémi Darnier, Vice President, Construction, Cities and Territories, Dassault Systèmes. Hello, Rémi.
Hello, Annette.
Thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
So, Rémi, let's dive straight in. We know that sustainability is an irreversible trend for cities, for industry, etc. How close to making it reality are we? How optimistic are you?
I'm very optimistic, Annette. We have this year with President Biden from US announcing that he is coming back to climate agreements. President Xi announcing that by 2060, China will be neutral carbons. This gives me a lot of optimism. So sustainability is now becoming a major issue, but also an opportunity for cities that need to integrate it as a permanent driver in order to keep their attractivity and their livability. So it is in cities that we observe the strongest societal challenges. So world cities and government authorities are creative, inventing new practices, governance, and new experience of economies. Look how, for mobility, for example, we move from a car-centric mobility practices to soft mobility in less than 5 years. So world cities such as Hong Kong, Shanghai, Paris have been adapting their infrastructures in order to welcome bicycles. So digital gave us unique chance to explore, experiments, unlimited number of options before going to physical world. So by connecting the real and the virtual worlds, we can make our environments more sustainable and lovable. So this is a big change. In the next hour, we want to show regional and city authorities how we can help them to take back control in facing rising challenges, prepare for resilience, and anticipate the flow of inevitable crises from heat waves to floodings, for example, and health pandemic, how to optimize and manage their cities day to day. And last, with new digital technologies, we can help them to transform their thinking, planning, and responses in order to optimize mobility and space and tackle many issues from all forms, such pollutions, air, light, noise, to energy waste and to congestions. So what excites me today, it is this technology can break down silos and ensure stakeholders can collaborate more closely and access unrivaled data to transform our cities in better places to live.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Rémi. Stakeholder thinking about cities is evolving fast. To tell us more about the new vision for cities, our next guest is Professor Carlo Ratti, an Italian architect, engineer, inventor, educator, and activist. He is a leading voice in the debate on new technologies' impact on urban life and design, how they are changing the way we understand, design, and ultimately live in cities. He heads the MIT Sensible City Lab at MIT, a research group that explores how new technologies are contributing to rethinking future of cities. Professor Ratti is also a founding partner of the International Design and Innovation Office, CRA, Carlo Ratti Associati. Carlo, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. So, in a past interview, you quoted Paul Valéry. What I want from modern technologies is to help me do all things in a better way. Where do you see us driving sustainable, human-centric urbanization better? What can we still improve?
Yes, I'm a great fan of Paul Valéry, but let me tell you a bit, in a broader sense, what is happening today in cities. The situation today in cities is very exciting. Today, we see a convergence of the physical and digital world. One way to say it is that the internet is becoming Internet of Things, is entering the space of the city. And as such, is changing many dimensions of urban life. You know, the way we understand cities through data, the way we can use artificial intelligence on the data in order to design them better. Really, the way, as I was saying, we live in cities is being changed. Well, some people call this the smart city domain. We don't like that word very much. That's why our lab is called Sensible City Lab. We like a city that's able to sense, but also sensible. We don't want to put too much emphasis on the technology, on this kind of city like a computer in open air. We want to focus more on the human side. And that's really what Paul Valéry was mentioning. You know, sometimes new technologies should not create new needs or should just, help us to do the things we always wanted to do, the things we dreamt of, and just make them possible. Well, that's what I think today modern technologies are allowing us to do in our cities.
And how do you see cities and regions changing their organization approach to become more sustainable? Has anything surprised you?
Cities are crucial for the sustainability of our planet. Think that cities are only 2% of the surface of the planet, but they're 55% of the population, 75% of energy consumption, 80% of CO2 emissions. So if we can do something to make our cities a little bit more sustainable, that could be a big deal globally. And well, what can we do? Certainly we can focus and invest in infrastructure. Infrastructure is very important, and especially now after COVID, cities all over the planet, and also countries all over the planet, think about what is happening in the United States, are investing heavily in infrastructure in order, again, to facilitate our transition to a net zero carbon world. My suggestion would be, however, when we think about infrastructure, let's not just think about the physical infrastructure. That's important. It's about electric cars, it's about micromobility, it's about, different other more efficient physical services. But let's also think about the digital infrastructure. That's also very, very important. Digital through data can help us better understand how we're running things, but also optimize many processes and ultimately link better with people, with citizens themselves. And so somehow my point is we need to make sure that we rebuild a more sustainable, carbon neutral infrastructure, but let's do it both by thinking about physical and digital world and their convergence together.
Professor Ratti, let's focus on mobility now. We see cities taking some quite radical action fast, like the Paris mayor, who during lockdown decided to close one of the main Paris arteries, Rue de Rivoli, to cars to allow more cycling. You have talked a lot about how we can rethink mobility. Can you tell us how cities improve it?
Well, you're right. I used the Rue de Rivoli example in a recent editorial that I did with Richard Florida. We did it for Project Syndicate. It was published in many newspapers, also in France. But it was really an example of something that we've seen in cities all over the world during COVID. COVID was something new. We were not prepared. And so we had to try a different approach. We didn't know best practices. So we had to discover them. We had to try something and then see what works, what doesn't work. So from one day to the next, many projects that had been discussed for years or many years were solved and tried in a matter of weeks or even days. And Rue de Rivoli for me was one example of how the whole pedestrianization and giving the route that when I was living in Paris a few years ago was almost like an urban highway with 3 lanes of traffic, was turned over to bikes, to scooters, to public transportation, was totally reprogrammed. But that is an example of what we see in cities all over the world. Actually, the city of Milan, one of the first cities to be hit by the pandemic, was actually one of the first ones to try this new approach. Again, trial and error. Try something, see what works, what doesn't work. It's something similar to what in economy, an economist might call, creative distraction. Using a term by the great economist Schumpeter. And so I think we need to do more and more of that. I hope that this lesson we've learned during the pandemic will stay with us in the long term. Because, that's really one way in order to speed up urban innovation.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Ratti. You often talk about how sharing vehicles is becoming important. Can you expand a little bit?
You're absolutely right. In this kind of trial and error, there is kind of an overarching trend that, that I think is going to be more and more important in our cities, and it's about sharing. When you think about it, today, our cars are used only 5% of the time. 95% of the time, not only they're not used, but they actually use valuable space in our cities. They're parked somewhere. And so again, if we start sharing more, car sharing, ride sharing, think about all this new ebullient world of micro-mobility, well, that's a much better way to increase efficiency of all the infrastructure we have.
Right, so let's talk now technology. What are the different vertical applications that you see usefully being added to virtual twins?
I'm very excited about virtual twins. And the reason is that a virtual twin really has almost all the information you have in the physical world, but it's in digital form. So you can actually use that information in order to run simulations, to use artificial intelligence to better understand what is going on, and you can use it then in order to better design the physical city or better understand it. And applications are countless. All the applications people talk about in terms of smart cities can really run on a virtual twin. So anything about mobility, about energy, about water, about municipal services in general, about citizen participation, you name it. All of those can be revolutionized by virtual twins. And somehow the virtual twin, I would say, is almost the dashboard, the engine of what the city of tomorrow is going to be.
Professor Ratti, I would like to ask you, with everything you have done, what's next? What will excite you most to tackle?
There's many projects we are passionate about, and it would be difficult to enumerate all of them, but I want to add one dimension. So far we talked about digital and physical, so the world of data entering into the city. Well, I think tomorrow is going to be more and more physical, digital, and biological. And by biological, I mean, everything that lives in the city. We've done projects looking at viruses and bacteria into sewage. Actually, that project has been very successful with a startup and monitoring COVID epidemic in the United States over the past 12 months. But also, of course, the way we as humans, as citizens, inhabit the city. Through data, we can really better understand how life happens in urban area. And I think that's the most important thing. After all, remember Shakespeare. What is the city but the people?
Thank you, Carlo, for opening your minds, our minds, and giving us so much to think about. Great to speak to you. So do not hesitate to flash this QR code to access additional exclusive content and take part in our mini quiz. And now we will start Regions session. Enter your personal information and don't miss the chance of winning a virtual reality cardboard mask, which allows you to jump to the past and discover the ancient railway station of Singapore as if you were there. We're now going to turn our sights to how the COVID pandemic has accelerated the transformation of major cities and regions across the world. I am very pleased to have with me Jacques Beltran, Vice President Public Sector at Dassault Systèmes. Hello, Jacques. So you were actively involved in the transformation project for Grand Est in France. that started last year, and they contacted you when 15% of the population was infected with COVID. This means over 5 million people. How did you help them?
Sure, thank you very much, Annette. The region Grand Est actually, as you said, called us at the very beginning of the crisis because, as you may know, Région Grand Est was the region in France that was hit the most severely during the first wave of the COVID crisis. And the president of Région Grand Est, Jean Rotner, asked us to partner with one hospital institute in Strasbourg called Institut Hospitalier Universitaire de Strasbourg, to define with them what could be a cockpit, a sort of a digital twin, not of an object, not of an organization, but of a territory, to see on a map with indicators, have a direct information refreshed daily about the pandemic. What are the key indicators and how do they evolve? This is the fundamental element that President Jean Rotner was asking to have to be able to make informed decisions about the crisis.
Let's hear from Jean Rotner, the president of the Grand Est region in France, who showed the importance of strong leadership in transforming faster during a crisis.
Bien, écoutez, merci pour cette invitation et pour ce témoignage que je vais pouvoir vous faire depuis finalement le moment aujourd'hui où nous sortons de crise en France. Je crois que ce qui est important de comprendre pour la région Grand Est, c'est que il y a un avant-crise, il y a la gestion de la crise et il y a aujourd'hui peut-être le futur qui va s'agir encore d'inventer. Sur l'avant-crise, nous avions d'ores et déjà pris un certain nombre d'options liées à cette notion de transformation numérique, de transition, avec la décision d'équiper l'ensemble des foyers de notre région du très haut débit, d'offrir à chaque lycéen un ordinateur de telle manière à ce que nous puissions assurer cette transition dans l'apprentissage des savoirs, mais de travailler aussi avec nos centres de recherche sur l'intelligence artificielle et le faire dans une position géographique tout à fait singulière en France, puisque nous sommes au cœur de l'Europe, en lien avec la Suisse, l'Allemagne, le Luxembourg et la Belgique. Tout cela fait que bien depuis de nombreux mois, nous avions petit à petit transformé, nous avions assuré cette transition vers le numérique. Arrive cette crise dramatique, extrêmement meurtrière dans le Grand Est, puisque dans ma ville, à Mulhouse, eh bien, nous avons été pendant quelques semaines l'épicentre de cette crise française. Et au niveau de la région Grand Est, elle s'est ensuite prolongée vers Strasbourg, vers la Moselle, vers Metz et vers Nancy. Mais paradoxalement, cette crise a été un accélérateur de solidarité, un accélérateur de l'innovation, un accélérateur de l'investissement et pour nous, la nécessité de nous poser les bonnes questions. Et nous n'avions pas forcément les réponses. Et les data, grâce à Dassault Systèmes, grâce à Capgemini pour le côté privé, mais aussi notre institut de recherche à Strasbourg, à Nancy, à Reims, nous ont permis, dans un consortium, eh bien, d'inventer un outil qui puisse être une plateforme pour nous politiques, pour les décideurs économiques, pour essayer d'anticiper, de comprendre les phénomènes qui se présentaient à nous et de prendre les bonnes décisions politiques, économiques. Et nous l'avons fait en quelques semaines grâce à l'intelligence collective. Ce travail avec le privé, pour moi, il est extrêmement intéressant. Il est souvent beaucoup plus rapide, il est porteur de dynamique et surtout porteur de coopération que l'on n'imaginait pas au départ et qui permettent de s'additionner et de se potentialiser. Et c'est pour ça qu'il y a eu cette avant-crise où le public a pris position, cette crise où nous avons été ensemble, en commun, public et privé, en train d'imaginer les outils du moment. Et ces outils du moment nous permettent aujourd'hui bien d'essayer de trouver des solutions pour le futur, en particulier dans la santé, sujet qui devient une des premières préoccupations des Français, où avec Dassault Systèmes, avec d'autres, mais particulièrement avec Dassault Systèmes, aujourd'hui nous essayons de travailler justement sur une évolution de ce système, sur la capacité d'accélérer les données, sur notre capacité de les sécuriser, de les traiter, de définir également une forme d'éthique dans l'intelligence artificielle et de permettre justement autour de nos frontières, de devenir un centre de référence de l'intelligence artificielle liée à la santé, avec le Bade-Wurtemberg, avec la Rhénanie-Palatinat, avec la Sarre, avec le Luxembourg, avec toutes ces régions voisines ou États voisins qui nous permettent aujourd'hui de donner une nouvelle dynamique, un nouvel aménagement du territoire, un essor finalement nouveau par une collaboration qui est née d'un moment de crise et qui donne des perspectives d'évolution tout à fait favorables. Voilà cette réflexion qui nous a habités en responsabilité, en agilité et surtout vraiment pour servir au quotidien les acteurs politiques et économiques que nous sommes. La data bien, a permis d'orienter nos décisions, de les anticiper et d'être plus rapides, plus agiles, plus efficaces.
I think it's really great to hear directly how regions were able to rethink their game plan. Jacques, how did you live the experience? What struck you?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank Jean Rotner, Region Grand Est, and all his team for their trust and for making this project a real partnership between Dassault System and this local government. How does it work? What is this cockpit for governments that we were able to deploy for this region? This cockpit has basically three main missions. The first one, as I said earlier, is to provide local public authorities or health authorities with a daily refreshed view on the situation of a crisis like a COVID pandemic. Because the indicators about the crisis, the number of people infected, the speed at which the virus is spreading, the number of people entering hospital, the number of people going to intensive care units, or even the people, unfortunately, that pass away, these people, these indicators are refreshed daily through the system automatically. And this was a big change with the beginning of the crisis, where worldwide, I would say, but in France, at least, many political leaders were complaining that they had the feeling they were lagging behind by, let's say, 1 month or 1 month and a half in terms of their perception of the reality. They thought the pandemic had reached a stage. And in fact, the pandemic was already where it was 1 month before. It had passed that by 1 month already. So the situation was much worse than actually they thought. So the first value of this cockpit is to automatically refresh and to give a real-time perception of the pandemic. But Région Grand Est wanted us to go further than that, and they asked us to integrate into our 3D experience platform, into this cockpit, a predictive algorithm that actually gives not only the instantaneous view, but gives a view of what the situation is going to be 30 days from now, in terms, for example, of number of people entering intensive care units. And that has proven extremely valuable. This algorithm, in the first part of year 2020, when it was at that time when it was implemented, the authorities in Région Grand Est told us that the error margin of this algorithm was something like between 5 and 8%, which is an excellent result. 5 and 8% error, margin of error in a hospital in terms of number of people entering, more or less, is perfectly acceptable and manageable for a hospital. And the third role of this cockpit is also something that local authorities appreciate very much, is that not only do we give a view at the level of the region or at the level of a sub-region, what we call in France un département, but we can also zoom and focus down to the neighborhood level, neighborhood being pockets of population of more or less 2,000 people. Why is it interesting to go down to zoom at this very operational ground level? Because precisely local authorities are not national authorities. And what they want, what they don't like, is to have a one-size-fits-all for all the country measure in terms of lockdown, for example. What they want is to implement smart lockdown measures. Lockdown measures that can be refined at a very, very precise, fine level. So when you have a map in front of your eyes in this cockpit that shows your 4, 5, 6 million people inhabitants territory divided into small pockets of 2,000 people, and that for each of those 2,000 people pockets, parts of the puzzle, you can have, for example, indicators such as the number of tests that had been performed in these small pockets. Then you realize that in the same city, like the city of Strasbourg, areas are not being tested exactly the same way at the same level. And if you identify parts of the city where people are less testing than in others, then you can decide to make a specific action in those areas. So this is really a cockpit that is meant for local authorities because it empowers local authority by giving them the right views, the right indicators, and the right leverages to go and act and to have an impact on the health of their population.
And so where do you think Dassault Systèmes brought greatest value to Grand Est? How did you help them improve and accelerate even their decision making? And how can the cockpit apply to other day-to-day management situations, Jacques?
I would say that the greatest value of a decision cockpit, like the one we deployed in Région Grand Est, is the ability of this cockpit to seamlessly be used in normal times and in times of crisis. But the same technology with a map of the territory and key indicators can be deployed for basically any public policy. If you replace the virus, the people infected and the hospitals by transportation, metros, trains, buses, people, or if you replace it by education policy, schools, numbers of students, then you can actually use this same decision cockpit for any public policy.
Thank you, Jack. If you had just one thought you would like to leave participants with, what would that be?
I would actually have three thoughts that I would share with you. The first one is that I think local authorities are extremely agile and that these solutions that we have presented to you are perfectly fitted for that kind of level of administration. Why are they agile? Because big local authorities that govern populations, I would say, above 1 million, 2 million people. So we're not speaking of very small cities, but we're speaking of big cities or regions or départements. They are agile because they manage very important policies in terms of transportation, education, sustainable development, social care, and they have significant budgets. They own big assets, buildings, for example, and at the same time, they are very close to the ground. Whatever they do has an immediate impact on the population. And that gives them this sense of reality, but it also gives them an extreme agility. And therefore, these solutions are very, very useful for them. Second thought would be that most of these local authorities are actually sitting on a gold mine of digital data. And some of them don't even know they're sitting on that gold mine of data. And this amount of data that they have is most of the time, it's a potential that it is untapped, that it could actually much better value exploit than they do today. And a decision cockpit precisely is meant for that. When you are sitting on that amount of data, we can, through a decision cockpit, transform the data into information. And that information will become a call for action, for political action, public policies implementation. And my last thought would be that, people often opposite private sector and public sector, companies and public administration. Well, when it comes to the issues we're talking today, I don't think the difference is so big. What difference, for example, is there between a company that owns industrial sites and a region that owns administrative buildings? They both have to manage real estate. They're in a situation of asset management. They have KPIs. They need to perform. The solutions that Dassault Systèmes has been developing in the industry for the past 40 years And in particular, our 3D experience platform, I believe, is perfectly fit to serve exactly the same purpose in public administration in terms of increasing efficiency, gaining productivity, and facilitating, transforming collaboration among the different stakeholders inside the public administration, but also outside with the whole ecosystem.
Thank you very much, Jacques, for this very interesting discussion. So remember to flash this QR code if you haven't already. You will access extra exclusive content and take part in our mini quiz. Just enter your personal information and don't miss the chance of winning a virtual reality cardboard mask, which allows you to jump to the past and discover the ancient railway station of Singapore as if you were there. And now the next discussion is about cities. So we are going to cross France and head for Brittany, and more specifically to Rennes, to meet Fabrice, who is Construction Cities Territories Industry Director at Dassault Systèmes. Fabrice, it's great to have you with us. We know that increasingly cities are facing huge pressure from climate change. One of the growing risks facing cities across the world is flooding. We all, I think, we have in mind catastrophic scenes of the past few years, just recently in New Zealand. Just to share a few figures, the number of natural disasters have doubled in 20 years. US owners face 19 billion euros in annual damages. The EU is investing 2 to 3 billion every year for flood protection. It seems critical for cities beyond policies to prepare their infrastructure for upcoming hazards. Tell us how Dassault Systèmes can help.
Thanks, Annette. It's great to be with you today. So yes, you're perfectly right. Preparing for this is a huge challenge. Why? Because it's very difficult to forecast, and forecasts contain a lot of uncertainties. And to achieve zero risk would involve investments that no one wants to pay for. So we worked with a partner named Deltares, a leader in flood risk and resilience planning. We use the 3D Experience platform to support their methodology. You see, cities are organized in silos, which is normal to avoid global disruption if one service is down. But to plan properly for climatic hazards, you need everyone to assess all the infrastructure in a holistic way. Because what is key is to phase your effort so you can invest at the right time and trigger the right responses. You need efficient collaboration. You want everyone to work on the same data set with the same input. You want to simulate in the real world in the different scenario, and then you want to execute the plan, orchestrating the work of all the stakeholders. This is the power of a common virtual twin. You can plan in the virtual world to transform the real world. In addition, when the plan is digitalized, you can review it regularly and adjust it to a new forecast.
Now let's turn to another key issue, energy efficiency. Can you take us through what you have done for La Grande Motte and how you have helped them take a holistic view of where you can generate potential energy savings, Fabrice?
So energy savings are fundamental to achieve sustainability goals, and CT will be instrumental to succeed. Here, we work with another partner, Bouygues Construction, a leading construction company in France. They are currently upgrading the public lighting of the city of La Grande Motte, targeting to save 70% of the energy consumption of the city.
So let's hear more about it directly from the mayor of La Grande Motte, Mr. Stéphane Rossignol.
La ville de la Grande Motte est d'abord une ville jeune, puisqu'elle a fêté ses 50 ans d'existence en 2018. Elle est née de la volonté d'un homme, et quel homme, le général de Gaulle, puisque c'est en 1963 que le général de Gaulle a mis en place une mission qu'on a appelée la mission Racine, du nom de son président, qui était la mission qui a aménagé le littoral Languedoc-Roussillon. C'est inspiré des pyramides aztèques pour construire cette cité qu'on appelle la cité des pyramides, puisqu'elle est constituée essentiellement de pyramides en béton. Mais quelle pyramide, puisque ces pyramides en béton ont été labellisées au patrimoine du XXe siècle en 2010, mais qu'elles sont insérées dans un écrin de verdure, puisque la Grande Motte a 70% d'espace vert, ce qui en fait la première ville touristique verte de France, peut-être même d'Europe, mais enfin, on va être modeste, disons de France. C'est la seule ville en France qui a cette architecture spécifique, hein, où un seul et même architecte a tout dessiné, tout réalisé. Dans le monde aujourd'hui, ils sont 3 seuls architectes à avoir conçu une ville de toutes pièces. C'est Oscar Niemeyer à Brasilia et c'est Le Corbusier à Chandigarh en Inde. Écoutez, comme je disais, une ville verte, hein, donc 36 000 arbres à la Grande Motte, des kilomètres d'espace vert, ce qui constitue pour nous un budget important. Le PLU que la ville a adopté en 2016 a inscrit dans le marbre justement ce rapport 70%-30. Hein. Il n'est pas question aujourd'hui de créer de nouvelles zones à urbaniser, mais au contraire de densifier. Donc toute notre politique environnementale repose sur la préservation de nos espaces verts. La société Bouygues et la société Bondon qui ont obtenu ce CPE. Et aujourd'hui, si on a fait appel à un contrat de performance énergétique, c'est justement pour que les pollutions lumineuses que nous avons, les éclairages publics qui ont 50 ans, qui sont vétustes aujourd'hui, qui sont très consommateurs d'énergie, mais qui ne jouaient plus le rôle qui était celui d'éclairer, mais aussi de sécuriser une ville qui a grandi, qui est devenue d'une station touristique, une ville touristique, mais aujourd'hui une ville permanente qui vit tout au long de l'année. Et donc, il était nécessaire d'accompagner ce développement. Et c'est pourquoi nous avons fait appel à ce contrat de performance énergétique. Le jumeau numérique doit être pour nous un véritable outil d'aide à la décision pour la mise en œuvre de tous ces points dont je viens de vous parler. Cet outil, ce jumeau numérique qui va nous permettre d'avoir une véritable cartographie des données de la ville pour une meilleure exploitation, à la fois en termes d'habitat, de nos bâtiments publics, des couvertures vidéo. On a aujourd'hui 81 caméras vidéo en dehors de la saison estivale où la ville passe de 9 000 à 100 000 habitants l'été. Hein. Mais c'est aussi un outil qui va nous permettre de gérer nos manifestations culturelles, événementielles, qui sont très nombreuses, hein, avec la modélisation des flux piétonniers, installés pour une communication virtuelle avec nos commerçants, avec nos administrés, pour organiser des plateformes d'échange, de discussion, de mettre en valeur des bâtiments spécifiques, identitaires de la Grande Motte. Voilà, en tout cas, pour nous, ce que ce jumeau numérique peut apporter d'intéressant à une ville jeune et moderne comme la Grande Motte.
That's quite an endorsement from the mayor. You must be pleased, Fabrice.
I'm really thrilled to hear that story. We have been working with Bouygues Energy and Services for some time now, and we know that every city needs a virtual twin. And I'm glad that Bouygues, thanks to Bouygues, we have been able to bring the 3D Experience platform to the city of La Grande Motte.
And what is the biggest insight that you would like to share from your experience with Rennes and other cities, Fabrice?
For the past 6 years, I've been working with cities in different parts of the world. There are 3 things that I see everywhere, regardless of the size of the geography. First, all cities need a place to invent their future, to a common place to invent their future. There are topics where you cannot work in silos. Being able to coordinate initiatives between multiple stakeholders and orchestrate the execution of projects in the context of a virtual twin will save you time and money. And the biggest insight I have from Rennes is how fast they have been autonomous. And now they are inventing usages of the virtual twin. So in addition to urban planning projects, they are also using the platform to study nuisances like noise. They are using the platform for citizen mediation to explain the logic behind complex projects and appease concerns. And they're also doing experimentation for green coverage analysis. So whatever the size of the city, they should plan to implement a virtual twin to manage increasingly complex challenges that they have to face.
Thank you very much, Fabrice, for enlightening us on how cities can prepare for their next crisis and how they can drive energy and efficiency. For our next session, we are going to change continents and travel to Hong Kong. For those of you just joining us, don't miss out on exclusive extra content and our mini quiz by flashing this QR code. Enter your personal information and try to win a virtually reality cardboard mask, which allows you to jump to the past and discover the ancient railway station of Singapore as if you were there. Now we talk about districts. I invite you to go to the district area in the website right now. It's time to find out how Dassault Systèmes has been working to transform Hong Kong with Arup, an independent firm of designers, planners, engineers, architects, consultants, and technical specialists working across every aspect of today's built environment. As part of its smart city blueprint, Hong Kong wanted to establish a common spatial data infrastructure. Arup and Dassault Systèmes jointly proposed the 3D experience platform as the foundation of the CSDI to Hong Kong's planning department to optimize smart city operation and management. And I'm pleased to welcome back Rémi Donnier. Hello again. So, Rémi, very quickly, why are Arup and Dassault Systèmes such a good fit to help cities transform and tackle the very big challenges they face?
Well, Annette's Arup's vision is shaping a better world, whereas Dassault Systèmes' vision is to provide to business and people virtual universes in order to harmonize product, nature, and life. So we are both innovative companies focused on transformations. So Arup's expertise in really transforming cities for decades across Asia, combined with Dassault Systèmes' 3D experience platform technology, made a very good match.
Rémi, can you tell us a bit more about the CDSI project in the context of the 2030 blueprint? What was the biggest challenge facing Hong Kong as it looked to optimize space and livability in its very specific geography?
So Hong Kong is a 7 million inhabitant city, highly connected to China mainland, with a unique DNA that they need to keep somehow. And Hong Kong is inside the Pearl Delta regions, which is a region of 60 million people, and they need to keep their attractivity and competitivity against those other cities like Shenzhen, Macau, and Guangzhou.
Yeah.
So it's very important for the government to overcome today their usual practices inside the government and break silos. There is 33 departments inside the city of Hong Kong, as they need to promote data sharing practices. So Dassault Systèmes, we conceive new generation of collaborative applications based on the virtual twin strategy. So some of the key challenges we wanted to solve, for example, is to improve the walkability, the mobility experience inside the cities. Anyone who has been to Hong Kong Central Island has ever get lost once at least. Why? Because in fact, it's very complicated to go from one point to another, because in fact, the path is going underground in multi-layers and above ground as well. So it's exactly the same problematic for planners. And planners needed the tools in order to assess if the place was vibrant enough and to understand the walkability experience inside the given locations. So we use the virtual twins in order to build a walkability experience and according criteria such smart, enjoyable, connected, or safe. And we gather the data coming from many governments, for example, on enjoyable. If there is a lot of greenery on the path, then the path is enjoyable. So if there is some fence or some lights, it's safe. And therefore, we could bring from this, in fact, a good assessment tools for walkability experience. Another example, we developed underground virtual twin for Hong Kong in order to support the demands about excavations. When you do an excavation, there might be a lot of networks underlying, and we need the virtual twin supporting the decisions for excavations. And it helps as well urban planners to understand how they can better make good use, in fact, on the underground space available. Last but not least, we develop a new apps in order to coordinate and build with urban planning, a generative urban planning environments, where here you have two actors. You have the urbanist, Arab, for example, which is imagining a new area from scratch, and there is the planners, decision makers, who try to understand various alternatives and to find the best fit, the best match. So this is where the virtual universe can help in order to bring, thanks to collaborations and to virtual review, the best options, the best compromise on an urban planning design.
Thank you very much, Rémi. Very clear, I think. So let's connect straight away with Sankar Vilupram in Hong Kong. Sankar, thanks for being with us today, as I know it's very late in the day for you. We were just talking with Rémi about the CSDI projects in Hong Kong. What struck you in the project?
Hi, Annette. Thanks for having me here. I think this is a future opportunity of making a sustainable world, and this is where we need a strategic and sophisticated platform like Dassault's and a sustainable development objectives of Europe, where we come together to create new opportunities for a better world for the future generations.
And where do you think Aruba and Dassault system added most value?
In order to design the future city for a livable city and a citizen-centric based city, we need to have the present data, not just only the past data. And to do that, we need a collaborative and a sophisticated platform like Dassault, which can provide us an evidence-based analytics with the Arab's expertise to design the future cities.
So Sankar, if you were to start again, are there things that you would do differently? What are the big insights from working with Hong Kong?
I think it's less to do with the technology. It's more to do with how we will approach the project together, because as it is a collaborative platform, we need a collaborative experience from the customers from different departments to come together to create a livable city. It may not be just only one department or one kind of focus. So it may be best from multiple departments to come together to create one integrated city monitoring and management system.
Thank you, Sankar. Rémi, what about you? Anything you would change?
So in order to go to the directions of Sankar's, so it's very important to manage the transformations, human transformations, with very didactic and simple use case to onboard people with technology. So it starts with collaborations and virtual twin-based reviews, for example, no transformations, co-creation practices, so that people can learn to collaborate first.
Good. Sankar, my next question is for you. What would you say are the main success factors in transforming a city and making it more sustainable and livable?
It's a very different experience expectation for different cities. So there's no one shoe that fits all. But from my personal experiences, the customer expectations or the citizens' expectations of how they interact with the cities are changing very rapidly. So it's really very important for us to understand the citizens' behavior, which has actually been accelerated by COVID, how the people react, behave. So it is really important for us to have really close to near real-time data to understand about the citizens' behavior and the expectations from the city itself. And so that actually will make a really important aspect of how we design the services for the citizens. Because it's not like we design a service, but maybe the citizens don't prefer it. We have to ensure that this is a collaborative and a feedback loop there.
Yeah, what about data privacy? We heard about data. How do you reassure cities about who can host and access this data?
So data privacy and data sovereignty, it's really a key topics for cities that we need to be effectively addressed. So we have several options existing in order to address this. So we can use a cloud infrastructure with some data that are located in the country, or we can use, in fact, some dedicated cloud options in order to host the solutions of the city inside their infrastructure.
I turn to Sankar for the next question. How have cities changed their approach to sustainability?
It's a very good question. I think every city is aware of it and every city wants to do something more. Maybe there are a couple of issues. One is, how do they define their targets? That's the biggest challenge for the cities, is the target definition, whether it is achievable targets or are these targets going to be on paper? And this is where the science-based target is very important of how much they can achieve and what are the initiatives that they can do to achieve. From a commercial organization perspective, without the right subsidies, the commercial organization will not act on this because they're not going to make enough return on investment to make a huge investments on these things, especially for smaller cities like Hong Kong. There is not big economy of scale compared to like mainland. So if there's no economy of scale, if not enough business, the commercial organization is not going to do too much about it unless the cities and the governments are going to provide the initial subsidies. So apart from setting the target, they also need to, bring in the right kind of subsidies to make the biggest impact.
Sankar, do you have any concrete examples?
So if we just take construction, which is actually one of the biggest contributor for any kind of sustainable issues, the materials that's being used or the way it is being designed, whether it's prefabricated or etc. Hong Kong is doing some preliminary efforts on this, but it's not the mainstream market yet. We are not yet there. So that is where, in terms of construction sustainability, it is very important for the government to kind of step in and provide enough subsidy to actually go towards these kind of sustainable construction, sustainable development.
Thank you very much, Sankar. And I hand over to Remy for the final word.
Well, so we have just seen how virtual twin strategy can help decisions makings and transformations of the cities across the entire value chains from conceptions to operations. Virtual twin reveals collective intelligence, and that's the most important things to start, enabling also co-creations between different parties. And this is contributing to bring a cities which is smarter and more livable.
So thank you both, Sankar and Remy. Remy, we will see you back here in a few minutes. But first, we are going to stay in Asia and jump to Singapore. We're getting a great sense of how city planning, designing, and building is evolving. One area that is particularly fascinating is how we preserve and give new life to our historic buildings to bridge the gap between our past and our future. If you want a chance to experience a national treasure in a unique way and discover some exclusive extra content and our mini quiz, then flash this QR code. Enter your personal information and try to win a virtual reality cardboard mask, which allows you to jump to the past and discover the ancient railway station of Singapore as if you were there. In this last session, we'll focus on buildings. And to share her experience of preserving national monuments, our next guest is Jean Wee, Director Preservation of Sites and Monuments, National Heritage Board, Singapore. Jean, welcome. In Singapore, the Tanjung Pagar railway station has been an essential link between Singapore and Malaysia. And I understand that several government agencies have been involved in the restoration project. Tell us a little bit about the project, please.
Built in 1932, the Tanjung Pagar railway station was a symbolic node in a railway network linking Malaysia to Singapore for 80 years, as it served as the southern terminus to its primary transport line. As part of a government-to-government agreement, the Malaysians vacated the site in 2011 and moved its operations to the Woodlands checkpoint. The Singapore Land Authority took possession of the extensive site as well as the 24-kilometer rail corridor. The station was then designated a national monument by the National Heritage Board. After the station closed in 2016, plans for restoration and design for the new use of the station began. The National Heritage Board has been working closely with agencies involved to look at how to protect features of historic value as well as approaches to restoration process. When completed, the station will see the sensitive integration of the Cantonment MRT station below. Commercial spaces and the immediate adjacent rail corridor will offer recreational and community greening activities, complementing the development of the waterfront district.
And Jean, how did you retain the historical nature of the building?
For some people, preservation connotes a level of fossilization. So The monument per se will require full retention of its iconic features. However, there will be sensitive design and integration for the adjacent sites. So ultimately, there will be a juxtaposition of the past where some can relive those nostalgic moments with refreshed modernity. We hope to be able to encourage a heritage gallery at some point on the site as well.
So you have made it possible for all generations to be immersed into the past, even while a building is closed and preparing for the future, isn't it, Jean?
Well, yes, that's the idea. But the value of the VR experience for me is that it magically transports anyone into a historically rich context at a time when the site is closed, as you said, for extensive renovation. By the time the former Tanjung Pagar railway station is up and running, this VR experience will continue to offer a timeless look back to its heyday.
And Jean, what was the biggest achievement?
I think it was getting the multiple stakeholders with different agendas to come on board this project. But I think everyone saw the value of the VR, and whilst there was work involved, clearly there was also a lot of pleasure to see it come to fruit at every stage. I should add that one of the unique things about this project was that it was an example of a public-private partnership, in a sense, that we had, on the one hand, government agencies like the National Heritage Board, the Singapore Land Authority, a private company like Dasso Systems, as well as a university with SUTD coming in as well.
So one of the objectives was to involve young generations and the university world. How did you do this?
Well, at the very beginning, we actually had Dassault Systems co-develop the experience with SUTD students of the Architecture and Sustainability pillar under Dr. Peter Ortner with support from the Dean, Erwin Viray. So they were involved right from the start. But following that, we have every intention actually to pilot this for schools. So, the data content, of course, will have to be modified, but we plan to launch this so that students get a chance to actually experience this virtually, take them out of, the physical classroom for a while. And we're going to launch this pilot in schools very soon. We're also on track to actually have the full VR experience in an exhibition at the National Museum of Singapore at the end of 2021. So do join us for that. And we look forward to actually being able to use this system for a very long time.
Thank you, Jean, for bringing the iconic Tanjung Pagar railway station to life for us. And we will welcome back Remy. So it's time for the conclusion. Remy, so many interesting projects have been discussed, and we have a great sense of the potential of the virtual twins backed by the 3D experience platform. So what are the 3 takeaways you would like to share with us?
Well, Annette, if I had 3 takeaways to share, the first one I would like to share is regarding the virtual twins and 3D experience platform, which are game changers in order to invent more resilient, human-centric, and sustainable cities. They support the entire value chain from design, conceptions to operations, and it provides virtual universe to co-create smarter environments addressing multiple departments of the city, such as mobility, education, health, and safety challenges. The second takeaway I could share is that they can give back control to decision makers and facilitate smarter and faster decisions making and orchestrations in normal and crisis time, as you could see with Jean Rotner. Last but not least, it's a new generation of collaborative, evidence-driven 3D experience platform which change how multiple stakeholders can collaborate together, breaking down silos.
Thank you very much, Remy.
You're welcome.
It was great. So that brings our session to a close. I hope that you have enjoyed the different discussions. Don't forget to flash this QR code to access additional exclusive content or to take part in our mini quiz. Just enter your personal information and try to win a virtual reality cardboard mask, which allows you to jump to the past and discover the ancient railway station of Singapore as if you were there. So thank you very much for being with us today. Stay safe, stay well.